Now, we have a Sunday Times update, which is live on our website and, of course, the app. Subscribers can now read our chief political commentator, Tim Shipman's long read. And I'm delighted to say Tim has just flown into the studio like an F-16 jet. And he's here to give us an update. Tell us about your piece, Tim.
Good Lord, that's quite the introduction. Yes, well, look, we've done the first interview with Rishi Sunak, the first sort of proper interview that he's done on this deal. He's still being a little bit cagey about the details, but it's fairly clear that we're not far away from this. And what he's trying to do is get on the front foot and argue that this deal that he's done is ticking the boxes on sovereignty, on tax, and on a whole range of issues, and trying to make the argument to the right of his party and those Brexiteers in the ERG that this is a good thing, and that they will be hopefully impressed by it. There's been a lot of criticism of Sunak not briefing people on what's been going on, and Downing Street being deeply secretive about it. That secrecy hasn't entirely lifted this evening, but he has finally come out and made a case saying this is all about doing Brexit, making sure it works for the whole country. It's unfinished business, he says, and he's talking about sort of, making sure that Brexit works for everybody. So he's trying to sell it in terms that people in the ERG might like. And then the long read more generally has some extremely spicy things from the week. Boris Johnson, as we know, is causing mayhem behind the scenes as usual. Brexit's starring role is still standing in the wings, sort of waving, look over here, look over here.
Look at me.
Look at me. And we're told he was in the chamber during the debate marking the first anniversary of Ukraine. And Robert Buckland, who is his former cabinet colleague, who is his Lord Chancellor, and I think takes a fairly dim view of some of the excesses of Boris Johnson's Brexit policy. Johnson is pushing for this Brexit bill to be pursued, and Buckland wasn't getting anywhere with him. So he tried talking to him about, look, we need this for, good relations with the EU and the Americans. And Boris Johnson was overheard replying, "Screw the Americans," except the word "screw" began with an F. And Boris Johnson's team are not denying that was said. They're saying it was a jocular conversation which has been misunderstood by somebody. Not quite sure how you misunderstand quite what he said there, but as we know, he has form for saying F various things.
Yeah, business. Yeah, we remember
famously.
that well.
And then the other intriguing thing is that this whole business of the bill that he's pushing, which he says would be great leverage for Rishi Sunak. I mean, the government say if we push this bill through, we'd have turmoil in the House of Lords because there were 92 amendments against it. It wouldn't even go through. And if we tried it, the EU would stop talking to us about things like small boats, which we're also trying to solve. That's one thing politically. But Johnson says, this is a great legal cudgel that we can wave at them. I've got hold of the legal advice that Boris Johnson was given in 2019, which effectively says that this bill is barely worth the paper it's written on, and that it could only possibly be a temporary solution. And if the EU took us to court, we'd still have to pay them reparations, even while we were in arbitration. And then to cap it all, at the end of it, we would have an international law obligation to adhere to the rulings of the European Court of Justice, which is precisely the thing that the Brexiteers claim that this bill would avoid. So it's a pretty astonishing bit of paper that I've been passed.
So, Tim, is your sense that Rishi Sunak is going to unveil the bill and then plough on? Is there a point where he says, even if the DUP doesn't like it, and even if some of the ERG doesn't like it, he says, you know what, I'm calling your bluff, it's better for the country, I'm putting country above party, I'll get it through even if it means relying on Labour votes?
Well, I think that's exactly what he's going to do. I don't think he wants to have a vote if it's reliant on Labour votes, and a lot of people think that there might not need to be a vote. Labour, of course, will try to force a vote in some way. But what I think he seems pretty confident when we saw him this morning that what he's got is pretty good. And actually, when you speak to various members of the ERG, they say if what has been reported is what he has got, then it does sound quite good, and I might be prepared to support it. They would all like the DUP to get on board, but I think a lot of people think that the DUP might not get on board because they don't really want to go back into power sharing with Sinn Féin. And Sunak seems keen to plough on. Now, they won't say exactly when, but my impression from talking to various people is that this is most likely to happen on Monday. There was some stuff around the coordination on Friday afternoon where it looked like Ursula von der Leyen was coming to London, and that was all put on ice. So that's delayed things a bit. They claim there are a couple of things that need I's dotting and T's crossing, but I sense we're quite close.
So,
and all he can do is publish this thing, say, look at this is quite good, and hope that people agree with him.
final question, really quickly. John Redwood was on my show last week, and he said, look, well, I'm going to be guided by what the DUP think. Is that... Where do you think the majority, is the majority of the ERG in a more sort of moderate position? Are they going to look to Jeffrey Donaldson to give them a veto on
A
this?
lot of them will, and people who want to cause trouble will say, well, the DUP haven't supported it, so I can't. Downing Street's hope is that the DUP, at least initially, don't really say very much and that they let the thing breathe and speak for itself. My sense is that quite a lot of ERG people I've spoken to are kind of hopeful that they can find a way of supporting this. But clearly there's a danger that they could have a load of rebels. I think, the difference between a DUP backing it and not is probably the difference between 0 and 40 Tory rebels or thereabouts. You might end up with 20 even in a situation where they didn't say a great deal.